they're interpreting it the wrong way, because the Quran does not say go kill all these people.
Actually, it does.
No, it doesn't.
This Muslim confronted the Christian preacher by asking if he had ever read the Quran. She asserts that extremist groups like Hamas and ISIS are acting in opposition to the teachings of the Quran. The conversation starts off well, with the Muslim declaring that she is against all the actions that ISIS does in reference to the Quran. Listen.
Okay, I'm a Muslim.
All right.
And I'm completely against ISIS and any group that does these things. I don't know if you've ever read the Quran or if you've ever been exposed to it, but the people that act in this way are going against everything that our holy book says.
Now, it is worth noting that the internal debate within the Muslim community over the interpretation of Islamic texts, where many argue that the Quran promotes peace and not violence. Historically, Islam is seen by many scholars as a religion advocating for peace, and groups like ISIS are considered to be extremist factions that misuse religious teachings. Anyway, let's hear what the preacher had to say about this.
Well, they're interpreting it differently than you.
No, they're not.
So that you don't.
I mean, they are interpreting it differently, but they're interpreting it the wrong way, because the Quran does not say go kill all these people.
Actually, it does.
Here, the Muslim is trying to clarify that extremists aren't just interpreting the Quran differently, but are misinterpreting it entirely. The Quran's message is often misunderstood as one promoting mercy and justice. However, extremists have misused certain verses, often taking them out of context to justify violence, which goes against the broader teachings of peace and coexistence found throughout the Quran. Historical context is key when interpreting religious texts. And although the Muslim is trying to justify that the Quran doesn't allow the killing of people, the preacher had a very different opinion.
No, it doesn't.
Surah 9.
Have you read it?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, I have it in my back pocket if you'd like me to read it.
The preacher's claim here may refer to controversial verses like those in Surah al-Baqarah or At-Taba, which, when taken out of context, have been interpreted as endorsing violence. However, scholars often stress that such verses are about specific historical conflicts and not a general command for aggression. In fact, most of the Quran advocates for peace, only permitting fighting in self-defense under strict conditions. Expanding the discussion beyond this narrow interpretation can help clarify how these verses fit into the larger teachings of Islam on peace and warfare. To prove his point, the preacher goes ahead and reads a verse from the Quran. Listen.
Because I had a feeling this might come up today. So I brought some verses from the Quran that actually do talk about this. Now, I understand you think there's an explanation. I get that, and I'm grateful for that.
Here, the preacher challenges the Muslims' assertion about the Quran's teachings, indicating a readiness to reference specific verses. This moment reflects a common debate tactic, bringing physical text into discussions to lend credibility to one's claims. The importance of context when interpreting religious texts is paramount, as a single verse can lead to vastly different interpretations depending on the surrounding text and historical circumstances. So, which are these specific verses?
But there are verses like this. Surah 9:29, fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, but impose jizya, which is submission, over the infidels.
This verse has sparked considerable debate among scholars about its implications for modern Muslim communities. Some interpret it as a call for religious tolerance and coexistence in a multi-faith society, while others view it as a directive for subjugation. The mention of jizya as a form of submission over infidels has often been misunderstood. In historical context, jizya was a tax levied on non-Muslims living in an Islamic state, allowing them protection and exemption from military service. This reflects a complicated relationship between governance and religion in Islamic history. Many scholars argue that rather than promoting hostility, such laws were designed to maintain social order and protect diverse communities. Understanding these nuances can shift perceptions about Islam's relationship with non-Muslims and the principles of coexistence that are central to the faith. But this was just the beginning. The preacher goes on and gives a second verse.
Surah number 5, the punishment of those who wage war against Allah and his messenger and strive to make mischief in the land, which is this is the verse of ISIS that they use because we're making mischief in the land, they believe, and so you can disgrace them and slaughter them.
At this point, the Muslim lady seems to be defeated and has nothing to say. Just look at her moving away from the mic.
So I get that you would explain these verses away. I understand that.
The speaker acknowledges the challenge of addressing certain Quranic verses that have been misused by extremists to justify horrific actions. This points to a significant issue within religious texts where interpretations can vary widely. Many argue that the Quran, like many religious scriptures, contains passages that require careful contextual understanding. Misinterpretations can lead to dangerous ideologies, underscoring the importance of education and critical analysis in religious studies. The use of this verse by ISIS highlights a common tactic among extremist groups, cherry-picking religious texts to validate their violent ideologies. While they may claim divine justification, many Islamic scholars argue that such interpretations are fundamentally flawed. Instead, they advocate for a more comprehensive understanding of the Quran, emphasizing peace, compassion, and justice. Historical accounts show that the Quran's guidance on conflict emphasizes restraint and the protection of innocent lives, contrasting sharply with the actions of groups like ISIS. However, it is essential to recognize that the vast majority of Muslims condemn such acts and advocate for a peaceful interpretation of their faith. The concept of mischief in the Quran refers not only to the violent rebellion, but also to societal corruption and injustice. Therefore, the teachings of Islam, when viewed in their entirety, promote a message of coexistence, ethical conduct, and respect for all individuals, regardless of their faith. To finish up the debate, the preacher had this to say.
But there are some verses that people that are Islamic have taken to do very terrible, wicked deeds. And I'm thrilled you reject that. I do too. But there are verses that are challenging for the Muslim to be able to explain them. There's a reason that some people have taken those verses literally and tried to apply them.
Here, the speaker highlights a critical point: the existence of verses that can be difficult for Muslims to interpret in a way that aligns with their faith's overarching messages of peace and compassion. This struggle often stems from the historical and linguistic complexities of the Quran. Some extremists seize on these challenging verses to legitimize their violent actions, leading to widespread misconceptions about Islam. In fact, one of the articles in Hamas's 36 Doctrines claims that jihad is the fundamental path, with martyrdom for Allah being the ultimate goal. It references a hadith that suggests men who die in battle for Islam will be rewarded with 72 beautiful maidens in paradise. These twisted teachings appeal to men's sexual desires within the Islamic framework for martyrers and are undeniably degrading and dangerous. Well, in recent years, the relationship between religion and violence has become a continuous topic, particularly concerning Islam. Many people associate Islam with extremism due to the actions of a minority of individuals and groups that have misinterpreted its teachings. This has led to widespread misconceptions about the faith, overshadowing the beliefs and practices of the majority of Muslims who advocate for peace, compassion, and coexistence. As various religious communities engage in dialogue about faith and morality, it is essential to address these misconceptions and emphasize the need for a nuanced understanding of religious texts. By examining the diverse interpretations within Islam and the vast body of scholarship that promotes peaceful coexistence, we can foster a more informed discourse about the religion and its followers. Understanding the distinction between the radical actions of extremists and the core values of Islam is crucial in dispelling myths and promoting harmony among different faiths. What do you think?